Uh, like I said, I graduated from high school in 1966. Went to college in Milwaukee for 2 years, left college, and enlisted in the Marine Corps. Went to basic training February of 1969 out in San Diego. Finished training, came home for 30 days in June of 1969. In the following month, I shipped over. Well, I went back to Camp Pendleton, California. We flew from California to Midway Island, refueled, went to Okinawa, spent a couple of days there, and then they flew us down to Da Nang, Vietnam. In Da Nang, we were split up. Not split up, but we were assigned to different divisions. The Marines had the 1st and the 3rd divisions in Vietnam. The 1st division was in the area around Da Nang, and then I went to the 3rd Marine Division, which was up in the Quang Tri province area, which is just south of the demilitarized zone. We went by truck from Quang Tri through Dong Ha out towards the Laotian border to Vandergrift Combat Base, where we joined up with our different companies and battalions within the 3rd Marine Division. Rifleman in a infantry company. It's called a line company, and I was assigned to the hotel company of the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. And you're assigned into a squad within a platoon, which is part of a company. And so we were initially helicoptered from Vandergrift Combat Base to a fire support base. I think that at that time in the 60s, I don't think a lot of the people that were draft age and the volunteers had any real specific political ideology. At that time, the draft system was in place, and you went. If you had not received a deferment, or your deferment was up, you were drafted into the Army. And rather than being drafted into the Army, I decided to enlist in the Marine Corps. And as far as ideology, none of us had any ideology at all. It was taking care of your fellow soldier, of your fellow Marine. You kind of just did what you were told.
Yeah.
Coming across elephant tracks on one of our patrols, and it just struck me as something that elephants you see in the zoo or you see at the circus. You didn't expect to see an elephant track, crossing where you're walking through this 6 to 8 foot high grass and brush and everything like that. It was just unnerving. And at night, occasionally you would hear tigers roaring.
Wow.
And that it was really unnerving because you're out there in their element. And of course you had the element of the enemy. That's their home turf, and they were much more familiar with the area than we were. They knew it inside out. And of course, certain nights there was no moon, no stars, and it was like being in a closet with the door shut. It was that dark. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was totally unnerving, about 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
August 1970, and when we were discharged from Camp Pendleton, California, we were told to expect difficulties going through airports, that people were taking out frustrations and everything on the soldiers and the Marines and the Navy guys that are in uniform or they perceive to be in the military. When I never had personally a bad experience, but you read about it all the time. You saw it on TV, and people were taking it out on the wrong people. Mm-hmm. They should have been taking it out on the politicians rather than the guys who are out there doing the grunt work.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I think that after doing extensive readings on Vietnam, the causes of the war, going back to the end of World War II, when the French were supposed to not come back into. You see, the Japanese had taken over Vietnam. Mm-hmm. In fact, it wasn't even called Vietnam back then. The Japanese had forced the French to a minor role, and Truman and Roosevelt and Truman were of the opinion that France was not going to maintain Indochina as a colony. After World War II, and with Korea and the communist influence in other countries, the feelings in Washington was that they wanted to contain communism, and with the latter part of the Eisenhower administration and the beginning of the Kennedy administration, they started a Vietnam policy of more and more involvement, and it was just a disaster. I think that the Vietnam experience is totally different than what we're going through right now with Iraq and Afghanistan and extreme Muslim or Islamic extremists. I think that the spread of so-called communism hasn't materialized. Russia's become more and more a capitalist country. China has become an extremely capitalist country. Vietnam is a capitalist country. I mean, they still have a communist government, but they probably have more factories and manufacturing than the United States does. And, I don't know what the politics is with the influence of so-called commercial interests, but there's a whole lot of money behind a lot of the wars, and it takes its toll on lives on both sides, and eventually you're back to square one. Mm-hmm. Nobody has achieved anything, and you've just lost a tremendous amount of lives. Like in Vietnam, there were 56,000 men and women killed. For what? For absolutely nothing. Now we're trading partners with Vietnam. It doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm.